every project has a story. And so you start to realize that, oh my God, like every deal has its own story and its own nuances and its own challenges. Nothing's ever the same. The process of development's the same, but all of the challenges intermittently are not the same. And so when you try to like take a big bite out of all that, it won't work. You'll choke. And you don't want to do that. So I just recommend that folks really study the deal, study the game of real estate development.
In this latest episode of Real Leaders in Real Estate, I have the privilege of interviewing Jaebadiah Gardner, real estate developer and author of Believe in Yourself. He's not just building projects, he's building pathways for the next generation of real estate developers. In this conversation, we discuss what it takes to really get into the real estate development game and why belief and mentorship are the keys to lasting impact. Hello, Jaebadiah. Thanks for coming on with us today.
How you doing, Jeff? How you doing, William?
It's good to see you.
Likewise.
So, Jaebadiah, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. You're not just building real estate, you're cultivating pathways for the next generation of real estate developers. And I'm looking forward to talking about your book here. But between your projects, your work in the industry, your book, Believe in Yourself, you're reshaping what's possible for the next generation of real estate developers. So let's dive in. So your book is full of life lessons for entrepreneurs. If you could embed just one mindset for a young real estate developer from the book, what would it be?
Hmm. Great question, Jeff. I appreciate you showing love and buying my book. Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's a lot to it. A lot to just, setting on the entrepreneurial path, and especially in the space of real estate development. I do think this is probably one of the most difficult businesses that exist out there. And I guess if I had to boil it down to one, there's several, but one that comes to mind, a core mindset is self-confidence. You got to have a lot of self-confidence to go out and execute on these projects because they're immensely difficult, and everyone from your family to the lender is going to tell you no, that it's not possible, that it won't work, and you got to have enough self-confidence to keep pushing forward. And that's why I named the book Believe in Yourself, because you got to really believe in yourself and believe in your mission in order to keep things going. So that's one that comes top of mind.
Great. Well, your background, I know that when I read your book, you worked in construction, you got a law degree, and now you're leading real estate development projects. So tell us a little bit about your background and how that your background shaped your philosophy for real estate development.
Yeah, definitely. Interestingly enough, I was a Kennedy Lancer, and I spent a lot of time in that wrestling room in Burien, and what was on the wall was desire, dedication, and discipline. And interestingly enough, 14 years old, you see that, and you really start to look back at like how you internalize desire, dedication, and discipline, and that's carried itself, manifested itself through me being a businessman and me really, pushing these real estate projects forward. And so, in high school, it was the early beginnings of like that self-confidence, right? And then also I had a really strong foundation with my father and my stepmother, who really set that belief as well. And then I went to University of Washington. I did a self-initiated project with a best friend of mine, Simona, and we built the monument on the campus at UW. And that really was kind of a microcosm of the work that I'm doing today. I learned at an early age how to really negotiate and have conversations with high level folks. I was really trying to negotiate a deal with the whole university of A, paying for the monument, and B, building it. And so, at 19, 20 years old, I learned early on how to get things done from that perspective. And that kind of carried me on to being a project engineer. My first job at a UW was working for Turner Construction, and learning how to build. And that was a pivotal education for me, like learning how to build, $100 million plus commercial buildings downtown Seattle. Prior to that, I had no construction background, no engineering background, like no real estate background. And here I am 22, 23 years old, learning how to piece together $100 million plus projects. And so that background was pivotal in my growth and knowledge. And so, I quickly realized that I wanted to, do something different, and I wanted to be a developer. And so that meant doing some research, finding out what developers do, who they are, where they come from, what they eat, when they sleep. I mean, I did crazy research and realized that that was a wealth center in America where like a lot of wealth is created, and I wanted to create that for my family and my broader community, and needed to needed to get some more information about that. So I went to law school, and I wanted to understand how to run a business, build a business, and specifically within real estate. And so I went to law school with the mindset, already kind of launched my company, and knowing that like I didn't want to go to law school to carry a briefcase and go to court. That's not the kind of attorney I wanted to be. I wanted to understand how to negotiate. I wanted to understand contracts, read them, how to write them, and all the ins and outs of the legal parameters of business and real estate. And that's what I set out to do. And it's been one of the best things I've done so far.
I love that answer. Um, you said that real estate should be used to build generational wealth, especially for underrepresented communities. What are the tangible ways new developers can stay grounded in that mission while still navigating this tough, high stakes industry?
Yeah, the first part is you got to get in. You got to get into the game, right? It's like when you break out the Monopoly board, at a family function, and if you're not sitting at the table, if you don't have a piece, you're not playing. If you're not a card or the hat or whatever, the cane, you're not on the board. You can't play. So the first part for me was like, how do I break into this space? How do I even get into this industry? And if anybody in this business knows, Jeff, particularly, you understand like real estate, you got to come into the game with capital. This is a capital intensive game if you want to be a developer. You can't just show up being like, I want to be a developer. You got to be able to have enough capital to acquire real estate, to pay for designers and engineers and lawyers and accountants. And that's not something where I came from. I didn't come from a space of resources. So I had to create all of that. And so, what I would recommend for folks is like if you're coming from a space where you don't have resources to just go out and acquire a property and start developing and start building, then you need to build your relationship capital. You need to build those bridges with people who are in spaces and rooms that you're not in. And you need to learn from those folks and leverage that education and leverage those relationships to eventually build your capital. It's just all a brick by brick process. It doesn't happen overnight. So I would definitely recommend that folks seek out mentors, like really, really seek out people who've done what you were looking to do hundreds of times over, because they're going to be your best compass when you're looking at a deal and you're trying to size it up. And you got to run it by them. I have an advisory board that I built, and every and anything that I do, I ask them about. And these are folks who are experienced, and if it's not advice, then it's maybe a relationship, right? It's like, hey, you know what? You should talk to so and so. They've dealt with that same instance, and I can get you in contact with them, and that goes so far. So I would definitely recommend, that folks, leverage their relationships, and the knowledge and the intellect, and then have that be the backbone to helping you build and you go out and seek capital.
Um, you mentioned seeking a mentor. So I wanted to ask this. In your experience mentoring others, what's one early mistake or blind spot you often see in new developers, and what would you say to help them avoid it?
That's a good question. It's kind of wild that like I'm at in the space now where I'm like mentoring people because I'm like I still don't know anything. So like I'm still trying to figure this game out myself. But one thing that I think about is I think a lot of young developers like they see the sexy side of development, right? They see like the building when it's done, the art, they see the developer when he's celebrating, but they don't really get to see the the 5 years it took to build that one building, and the pains it took to figure out how to pay for the architect or pay for the financing. And so there's a lot of I think there's a little bit of a misconception of how people misunderstand the work. It is really extremely difficult. And not a lot of people are built for that level of difficulty or risk tolerance. And so what I see often is sometimes younger developers want to buy, not even younger developers, just new developers, just people who are older, but they think because they have capital, they can be developers. And just because you have money doesn't necessarily equate to you executing on a development deal that has a positive outcome. So a lot of folks bite off more than what they can chew. They say, "Hey, I see this project, and it might be a large deal, and they end up spinning their wheels and not getting as far down the line that they had hoped, and so their dreams get crushed, their hopes get crushed, and then they go, maybe this is not for me. So I would suggest that either if you're a younger developer and or someone who's looking to get in development and you have resources, to start with a decent sized project, where you can get your hands wrapped around it, where you're not risking too much up front. And it's funny that I say that because I went from, owning a two-story duplex, maybe 3,000 square foot duplex, to doing an 80,000 square foot building, you know. But at the same time, like I got my education of building, working with a general contractor. And so if you're coming into the game with no experience at all, try not to bite off more than you can chew. And really spend a lot of time with those mentors, spend a lot of time understanding their projects. I would ask my mentors all the time about their deals. Like, okay, that project downtown Seattle, how did you get that finance? Who financed it? How long did it take to get built? Who was the architect? How long did it take to go to design? How, like, what did the city, was the city helpful? How was it hurtful? I mean, like a million questions. I'd be drilling down on just one project, and they would have a story about that one project, right? Every project has a story. And so you start to realize that, oh my God, like every deal has its own story and its own nuances and its own challenges. Nothing's ever the same. The process of development's the same, but all of the challenges intermittently are not the same. And so when you try to like take a big bite out of all that, it won't work. You'll choke. And you don't want to do that. So I just recommend that folks really study the deal, study the game of real estate development, and try to get in a project where you feel that you're not risking too much because you want to be able to execute.
Which is good. You reading your story. I remember one of the stories about maybe it was your first duplex, that contractor trying to bid it out, and then it catches on fire after you get it all done. And so it's got a story, but you learn from it. But all right, I want to get back to, you said access to capital. So that's one of the biggest hurdles for a new developer to get into, especially if you don't come from generational wealth or have that family and friends that have it. So you mentioned building better bridges of capital. Do you have an example of how we might do that? Suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. Like with any startup, if you're looking to raise funds to build your company, and in my instance, I had about maybe $4,500 saved up, and I was like, that's all I have to start a real estate development company. Like I didn't have enough money to even put down an earnest money deposit on a piece of property, right? I had enough to start a website and buy business cards. And so, you got to really, I mean, my suggestion would be, you got to cultivate, those relationships with people early on because, you know, like, especially if they're not family, right? And if your family doesn't have resources, you got to go out and cultivate relationships with folks who do have resources. And you got to understand that it's the relationship, not the capital, right? And so if you approach it as, oh, I'm going to go meet with this person because I know they have means and I want to get them as an investor, if you approach it from that lens, it's probably going to be a very short-lived experience, and you probably won't come out of it with any capital. So I approach things as like this is a relationship-based business. And yes, this person might have access to capital or the ability to invest, but that's not what I want from them. What I want is like what's inside here, and I want to build a relationship. I want to get to know them, and if the opportunity presents itself where I have an opportunity for them to invest, then it's an organic ask. It's an organic situation, and it's not like stranger danger. Hey, I heard you're in real estate development. Would you like to invest? I mean, no one likes to be pitched or sold. And that's the patience. Also, going back to your question, William, is one of the mistakes that I see often is like folks don't have the patience for real estate development. They want everything to happen now. They want the investor to invest now. They want the city to permit now, and nothing happens overnight. And if you don't have the patience to like be go along the journey, then you're gonna exit yourself out very early. So, you got to be patient. Identify people and groups and orgs and banks with capital and build relationships with them first. Before you ask them for anything, build relationships with them first.
Good, great advice. So you called the Sarah Queen Project a love letter to your grandmother and your community. Can you share more details about that one too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of my favorite projects. Well, they're all my projects are my favorite projects. But this one's particularly my favorite because I'm naming the building after my late grandmother. She was taken from us in 1987 tragically, and she was, just a pivotal woman in the Black community in Spokane in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and she was, one of the first Black women who had a brick and mortar business. She had like several salons in Spokane at a time where, there was a lot of racism and a lot of sexism. And she just fought through that. She just was gritty, she just was just all about the hustle. And that spirit of her kind of like, I feel like just kind of jumped in me, and I kind of carry her legacy on. And so I thought, what better way to really pay homage to her, but also pay homage to like all the Black women entrepreneurs who've like sacrificed and pushed through, is name a building after her. And also integrate a lot of really cool cultural art elements that speak to the history, of our culture. And so I'm hoping that it is just that, a love letter and a memento that's everlasting.
One of my favorite movies is The Lorax, and one of my favorite quotes from the movie is when the Lorax asks the Onceler, um, "What way a tree falls?" The Onceler says, "A tree falls down," and the Lorax corrects him and says, "A tree falls the way it leans." How do you ensure that your business is leaning in the right direction in case of times of crisis?
That's a good question. I think there's, depending on the entrepreneur or business person you talk to, there's several answers. Um, there's no one way to skin a cat to survive in the business world. And I really think it depends on the leadership and the business model that you have created, that will really test if it can stand the test of time. And so sometimes you don't know which way the wind's blowing. Sometimes you don't know which way your business is leaning. There's just a lot of unknowns. And, when you're confronted with, oh no, my business is leaning in a certain direction, you got to be able to correct course. And as a small business and entrepreneur, I have the fortunate ability to move on a dime. Like I'm not a Microsoft, I'm not Amazon, I don't have thousands of employees to where if things are shifting, it takes time to correct things. So as a small business, it's always been in my mind to keep things small and manageable, nimble, and flexible, so that when times do come and I do recognize that things are leaning in not the direction that we want, that we prepare ourselves to build some stilts to prop it up, so that way it's standing tall and in the direction that we need it to go. So I don't know if that answers your question, but sometimes you just don't know, and you just got to be ready to move on a dime, and have everybody in the ship, get ready to plug holes. And that's what a team is for, right? You can't plug all the holes with one person. And so having a good team brings to mind is super important. Having an amazing, dependable individuals who have the same vision as you and the same mission as you, is very helpful. So when those times get difficult and your business is leaning in one direction, you have a team that can help prop it up, and correct course.
No, that that definitely did answer my question. That was a great response. Um, I saw on your LinkedIn that you have a site that you're developing on 23rd and Union. Um, what made you choose this site, and why did you choose to make it affordable, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, that's the Sarah Queen project that Jeff mentioned. Um, eight-story building, 117 units. Like I said, 80,000 square feet plus total building size. Uh, you know, um, it's interesting. Like it was a natural organic deal. Like I had a relationship with the seller, which was Bishop Witherspoon, just a little bit of relationship, but we knew several of the same people in our circle. I got wind that he was wanting to sell his property, so I reached out and I convinced him that we would be the best buyer. And he didn't have to choose Gardner Global to work with. He could have sold it to a numerous amounts of folks who had a ready checkbook. But I decided that like pursuing this project made a lot of sense from the company's values, our mission and our vision of building wealth within the Black community, also Black ownership. And where the project is located is in the Central District, which used to be historically African American, which is not now. And so for me, I'm all about building wealth, right? And here was an opportunity to reclaim some land that would potentially be lost. And why not be able to build a housing project and offer some affordability? So you have the layers of Black ownership, you have the layer of paying homage to my grandmother and art and cultural pieces to the building, and then you have the layer of adding affordable housing. And so there was just a lot of things that lined up that made sense. And so that's one of the big reasons why I decided to pursue this project. Also, the biggest ring is economically it makes sense. It's got a pencil. Banks got to stand by it, investors got to stand by it. It economically needs to make sense. It needs to be good business. So this is also about good business.
Love that answer. Love that answer. In your book, you mentioned taking a hands-off approach, and you mentioned hiring middle-aged people, your interns or younger individuals, and you have seasoned individuals on your board. Um, how has this structure positively impacted your business so far, and how do you anticipate it will in the future?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of benefits to building an intergenerational company for sure. It's not easy because you have younger generation of folks that see the world in a certain way, and then you have an older generation of folks who see the world in a certain way. But if you're able to kind of find the lines of synergy from a work perspective, from a productivity perspective, man, I think you could build a tremendous company that way. So for Gardner Global, it's been super helpful hiring a lot of young folks because they're super social media savvy and just savvy around what's going on, like what's going on right now that's relevant, right? That can help build a company. And then it's helpful to have seasoned people on board because they're experienced and they know what to do and how to fix it and how to problem solve. And so if you're able to blend those two worlds together, like it absolutely has positive impacts to the business. So I've been able to try and cultivate that type of experience within Gardner Global, where I have seasoned, experienced board of advisors, and I have folks who are experienced, kind of middle management level, and then I have folks who are like in the younger generation who may not have a lot of work experience, but bring a lot of energy and creativity. And if you put all those together, yo, you could build a really amazing business that way.
Earlier, you had mentioned researching developers. Now we're in a digital age. I don't recall what year you were getting your JD. What did you use to research and learn more about development when you were trying to start your business?
Man, you make it sound like I was using encyclopedias or something, man. It wasn't that long ago. I did the research how I would today, like online. I had computers when I graduated law school, William. It wasn't that long ago. I wasn't Fred Flintstone Stone Age out here. But no, I mean, like I honestly I leverage my networks and my connections of folks who I knew, because I didn't have a world of real estate or development relationships. I didn't come from that space. So I didn't know anybody who did development. I didn't know anybody who was a broker. I didn't know one in property management, nothing. But I had older friends who did. So I would say, hey, one story, George Northcroft, man, one of my mentors. I said, George Northcroft, I'm building a development company. I want to be a developer. I just don't know where to turn. And he introduced me to somebody that was one of his good friends, that was one of Seattle's largest developers. And that was back in 2009. And to this day, we're friends, and he's one of my advisors. And so I leveraged my network to figure out how to meet folks within the real estate space. And then it was incumbent upon me to continue to foster those relationships.
In your book, you also described your business as being like petrified wood, um, just like that city in Italy.
Venice.
Venice. You talked about Venice. How do you remove oxygen to prevent the wood, aka your business, from rotting?
Yeah, that was an interesting question, actually. I appreciate you adding that in there. It means you read my book a little bit. Um, there's day to day, there's a few different things that I think need to happen to avoid corrosion within your business. And I think one of the biggest things for me is just consistency. You got to be consistent. I have to be consistent. When I wake up in the morning and like I have a choice. Do I respond to emails or not? Do I call my team back or not? Do I text my team members back or not? And, being consistent is something that is an ongoing growth area, but needs to happen. And when you're consistent, things change, things happen. It might not happen overnight, but you consistently do one thing over and over, something's bound to change, right? And so I've been in business for 16 years. I've stayed the course all 16 years. I've never switched up. I've never changed industries. I've never given up on building Gardner Global as a company. And so I think consistency with work and with communication, and it's hard, it's not easy. No one's perfect. I'm not perfect at it, but if you pay attention to it and try to focus on being consistent, I think that's one of the ways you can really help keep your business around for the long term.
Which is a great answer. And I mean, I'll say it goes back to you mentioned the wrestling room at Kennedy, right? We both were wrestlers at Kennedy. I just predated you by at least a decade. But Mr. Kosteka preached that, and it's about showing up every day and doing the little bits. And in your book, you said your book is for the hardcore hustlers. And a little bit, I loved a lot of little stories in that. I think entrepreneurs just, whether you're in real estate development or not, there are stories, and William kind of got to like, how do you meet people? You mentioned being in the game, being on the board. You had a story in there about, maybe you didn't have money to go to the big events where someone was, but you had a strategy maybe to go a little bit late and look for an empty seat, right? Those are the things that I commend you. I commend William, and he's a great student. You had your favorite projects. I have all my favorite students, and William, besides promising me a 4 minute mile, he's going to be a hustler. He fits into your book. So I loved all the little stories in there that people can take from it. So thank you for writing the book. But what I want to know is what's next for you now?
Yeah, yeah. What's next? No, Jeff, I appreciate it because sometimes I feel like those stories kind of get missed. But that story of not having enough money to show up to the galas or the dinners, I mean, I knew that the people in the room I needed to meet were there. So was I gonna let $110 ticket stop me from going? And that's the entrepreneur mindset. I was like, no, I'm gonna show up just a tad bit late when the registration table is empty, and I'm gonna go sit down at an empty table, eat food, and then target the people I need to target. So I appreciate you bringing that up because it's very subtle, but man, it's so meaningful. So what's next? Like it's funny because I don't actually talk about at all what's next. I know what's next, but I like to keep people on their toes, because there's a lot of a lot of just energy behind what we're doing, and I like to focus on today and then keep our plans for the future at bay. And then when they happen, I can tell you that was my plan, you know. So, but most of the folks know what we're involved with now, which is, an easy answer would be, we want to make sure we go vertical and build the Sarah Queen building on 23rd and Union. And then we own the property across the street. That'll be another 8-story building that we want to execute on. So that'll be also what'll be in our pipeline. Then I have 2 other projects outside of that. A very large scale, $100 million plus 3.5 acre site in Skyway. 470 plus units. Like that, like we got work. We got a lot of work ahead of us. And so I'm looking to deliver 800 plus units or so to the market in the next 5 to 10 years. God willing. And outside of that, working on book 2 and a lot of other things that folks will just have to wait and see.
A great answer. Well, looking forward to it. It's so great that you came into the class and spoke to William and the others, that you shared your knowledge and the stories you have to help inspire the next generation of real estate developers. So if people want to connect or follow you, how's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, no doubt. Man, the easiest way, Jebediah.com. I have a lot of information out there. I don't really hide online. So my Instagram's public at Jebediah. I'm responsive there. My LinkedIn, Jebediah. So if folks want to connect with me, I'd recommend starting there. And then, all the phone numbers and emails and stuff is all there for folks to see.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Love your energy, love your history, love all the stories. So thanks for coming on today and sharing those.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for having me. And William, man, what I'm saying? Just gotta believe in yourself.
Yeah, I really appreciate you signing the book, and I really appreciate you giving me a copy. I've been reading it every day. Not every day, but every day I've went to the gym. I've been reading it between breaks.
Nice. It's good to hear, man. Good to hear. Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.